Hello everyone and welcome to my library. If you're new here, hello, my name is Chinsia, and if you're one of my lovely regulars, hi, how are you? I hope you're doing fabulously. So today we're going to be talking about writing insecurities because of twofold. One, I've noticed a lot of people are afraid or rather intimidated about writing retellings of mythology, which I am here to completely debunk. We are going to get over that phobia together, but also just to discuss the fact that I've just overcome one of my writing phobias today for the first time, or rather one of my insecurities, as it were, and that's a little bit more raunchy discussion as we get into it. It's all about, if you're interested in how an aromantic writer writes romance fiction, then stay tuned for that. But first, I want to discuss more, Greek mythology, writing Greek myth, and the insecurities that come around that, because I notice this a lot. So we're going to discuss that today. So over the past few weeks, you may know that I am actually working with an app called Dorian. It's a choose your own adventure story, and every week I've been writing an episode of a Hades and Persephone style myth, or inspired myth. Episode 3 just went live today, and we'll discuss that with the more raunchy side in the later half of this video. But every week I also do a writing prompt to encourage people to write more about Greek myths and Greek mythology and rewrite them and all that jazz. And I actually have the winner for week 1. So the winner for week 1's writing competition is actually joint. It was actually The Prophecy by Alexis W. and Becca Bex. So well done if you're watching this video. You won. I chose your story. There were so many good Hecate stories, but I chose that one because they clearly went into so much depth and really created a whole world around Greek mythology that I really enjoyed, and it was totally new. And if you're curious and you want to win another $50 gift card, this week's writing theme, is actually on Aphrodite. There's going to be a whole prompt over on my Dorian account. So if you are new to Dorian, please use my link down below, or just follow my account if you're already on there. I say all this with the hyper awareness that a lot of people feel intimidated about writing about Greek myths in general. People are scared to write about the Greek myths, and I think it's all because classics in general, particularly, in mythology anyway, but classics has a huge elitism problem. Writing Greek myths should not be one of those. Oh, speaking of which, look what I'm wearing today. Every week I'm doing obviously a different Greek or myth retelling in general. Whether you want to make that Greek or Roman is up to you. However, people are intimidated about rewriting Greek myth primarily because of the elitist status of, getting it right. People are afraid to write about Greek myth because they don't know the myth well enough, or they're scared of getting something wrong. And that's the whole point of Greek myth. There is no origin myth for any Greek myth out there. Every single myth retelling that we have access to today is a reception of another retelling. The original of the original Greek myths doesn't exist anymore. Whoever first formulated the first Greek myths probably did so through oration, and it isn't documented. And every documentation of a Greek myth that we have is someone's interpretation of that myth, not necessarily the myth that was originally told. Euripides' retelling of a certain myth will be very different from potentially Aristophanes' retelling of a myth, etc. Everyone rewrote the Greek myths according to their interests, their versions, how they heard the myth, whether it travelled in Greece or Rome, what their political or personal agenda was when retelling the myth, etc. There is no such thing as the original Greek myth. There is no such thing as getting it right. And that's what I find so beautiful and also deeply ironic about the reception to Hercules, Disney's Hercules to be exact. There were quite a few classicists out there at the time who thought it was hedonism that the Disney played with the Greek myths, or rather myths in general, so broadly. And I say myths in general because Hercules is, you probably know, is the Roman name for Heracles, and if it's set in Greece then it should be Heracles, but Hercules sounded better. And this playing around with names, conceptions, the romances, making Zeus a good guy when he's clearly the worst Greek god ever in existence. That's a myth in itself. Zeus being a good, loving father and devoted husband is a myth of itself. However, all reception is reception, and there's no such thing as the original Greek myth. And I think Disney's Hercules is a wonderful example of that, and I absolutely love the film for it. They got the characters, they got the gist, and they just completely played around with it. They played with the conceptions, they made it fit to a particular modern audience. There wasn't merchandise for your favourite hero, but there's probably pottery that you could probably get, but there wasn't sandals or wheatle cups, like merchandise that you get in Disneyland. It's a completely different world, and that's what makes it so wonderful. And it doesn't make it an incorrect myth in any way. It may not be accurate to the original texts, but then are the original texts originals to the myth? Up for debate, no one knows. Every single myth is a retelling of another myth, and I hate that people feel scared to approach the myths for fear of getting it wrong, for being judged by, classical elitists who know the myth like the back of their hand and all that jazz. When in reality, when you're rewriting myths, unless you're publishing yourself forward as an anthology of some kind, and you want to be, the documentarian of an anthology, even that isn't entirely accurate. They will stick to particular retellings of the myth, but even then, every anthologist that you can read, whether it's Robert Graves, Stephen Fry, or Charlotte Higgins, they will tell the myths with a particular angle. They may follow the same, formulation, but they may retell the myths in different ways. Stephen Fry's recollection of how Medea ends up killing her children is very different from Higgins's, who claims that Medea didn't kill her children because she took on a different route. And yes, whilst Higgins's version is actually replicated in other, retellings of the myth by other ancient writers, Higgins could have done something entirely different. That's the beauty of Greek myth, and there's such a toxic misconception that one has to abide by how a myth is originally proposed, particularly when each oration or each retelling has been completely twisted in some sort of way. Yes, we're not talking about like Medea suddenly getting off with Heracles when they weren't in the same time period and just making a whole fanfiction of that, but who's to say that you can't? It's not, there is no law when it comes to mythology. If that's something you want to write, you should feel freedom to write about that, regardless of external judgments of authenticity of a myth, which doesn't exist. There's no historical accuracy to a myth. It is a myth, and to play around with myths is by all means what people did in the ancient times, and if you want to play with it within your whole realm and drag characters together that didn't exist in any ancient text, then good on you. You should do what you want to do with the characters at your disposal. That's the beauty of ancient myth. It's all fiction anyway. It's not like we're trying to say, hey, Rome never existed. We're not going down that path. We're going down a totally different path where we're playing with fictional characters and you can make the world any such way about you. It's a bit like that TV show that I never saw. Was it called like Ever After? I'll show the poster here. They just dumped in a load of different Disney films into the same world. That's basically what you can do with Greek mythology. And also, what's better about that is actually, you can't get copyright stricken for it. You can't get a copyright claim against the original creator for messing up with their worlds and dragging them all in together, because they're all dead. And they have no authority over them anyway, because again, it's mythology, it's folklore, there is no reality to it. People feel more free around fairy tales. People play around with fairy tales all the time. People twist them, change them, completely decontextualize them, and they don't get into trouble for it. Because unlike classicism, there isn't an elitist structure around fairy tales. People know that fairy tales are retellings, and they are allegories for other things. With ancient mythology, particularly Greco-Roman mythology, there is this misconception that they are set in stone. Greco mythology is as fair game as any fairy tale is. If you would retell Cinderella in a modern context, if you were to gender bend any other fairy tale, then feel free to do the exact same with Greek mythology, because there is no authority, and anyone who tells you otherwise is an elitist snob. And we shouldn't be catering to elitist snob, and anyway, if they don't like it, that's not your audience. At the end of the day, we're writing for a particular audience. The audience that reads your work will enjoy it irregardless, and I will always enjoy it, because I've been reading everyone's Greek myth retellings, because that's my role in Dorian. I want to encourage people to mess around with them like Rotten, because that's what we're meant to do. And yes, it is breaking your comfort zone. Yes, it may be, oh, what if someone picks it apart? No, it's just me. I'm not here to be judgmental, and I'm here to have a good time. And if you can retell stories in a really interesting, fascinating way with the characters at your disposal, you don't have to know them off by heart. You don't need to know every single version of every retelling of that myth in order to recreate your own version of that myth. You just need to know general structure. In fact, just know the character. Just know what the character was like. What was Medusa like? What was she about? And even then, we don't actually know what she was like. It's myth. She's fictional. No one knows what her personality was like. She could have been like that girl from Legally Blonde for all we know. Go with it. If you want to write a Medusa retelling with her as the main character from Legally Blonde, go for it. I've never seen the film. Can you tell? Was that really like completely out there? Good. Pick something that you don't know and just go with it. Go with your inspiration. Go with your gut. Play with it. That's the beauty of mythology. There is no law to abide. And anyone who says otherwise is just a pretentious elitist snob. And that's what I'm here to bring down as a new classics student. The system. Let it be challenged. Make it queer. Make it feminist. Make it masculine. I don't care. Do whatever you want with it. That's the beauty of malleable nature of fiction. It is wonderful. And when we're confronting insecurities about writing, that's what we should be playing with. which is what I've done in the latest episode. So I kind of procrastinated talking about this because I realised it's a demonetizable subject. But I just wrote my first in-depth sex scene in a book. And that's an interesting concept in itself, isn't it? In fact, I've been talking so much about myths and playing with it, I don't want to really bore you. But someone recently asked me, how can an aromantic person write romance fiction? And my answer to that is, it's fiction. Everything you see in a romance film doesn't reflect real life romance, does it? Everyone always says that, oh, Disney romances, these film romances give a false conception of what romance is like, but it's nothing like that. And because I can't experience the actual thing, I can just go by fictional. It's not like I'm writing about something that has severe in-life consequences, like a mental illness or a disease that I have not ever gone through, or someone else writing about it has never experienced, and then writing about it like an experience of a personal, or, experiences of prejudices that you cannot access as someone with privilege, etc. It's not that deep. It's just romance. I can write fairy tale romances. I read enough of them to know what they go like. I haven't seen enough films, but I've seen enough Disney films to know how romances are presented. And I've seen enough anime to know how romance is presented in the fictional world. It is nothing like the real life. I can guarantee that. As an aromantic person, I can guarantee that I am not missing out on Disney romances. But I know how Disney romances work. I know how fictional fairy tale romances work. And I can emulate that because it has no real life consequences. I'm not here belittling or undermining a situation of someone that should be taken very seriously and only depicted by people who have actually gone through that experience. I would not be advocating for such a stance for people writing about depression or particular eating disorders, say, who have never gone through them. Please don't write about those experiences that you've never gone through, that have real life consequences and actually can therefore be perpetuated in real life as stereotypes or misconceptions of that thing. That's dangerous. However, we could argue the same about romance, really, can't we? We can argue that misconceptions of romance, in fact, there are misconceptions of romance that I find quite toxic. We should do another video on that, shouldn't we? We should do about the dangers of misconceptions of fairy tale romances that actually are emblematic of toxic relationships that we shouldn't be encouraging young women to find attractive. Let's do that for another video. We will do that for another video. I can go all about toxic relationships. Love Actually. I've seen enough of that. Not all of it, but I've seen enough of that to know that no, we shouldn't be promoting that. That's not healthy. Not in the slightest. So yes, we will do a video on toxic misconceptions of fictionalization of romantic life. That is what we will call that video. It's not going to be very, clickbaity, is it? I'll think of something more clickbaity. But I think that's my rant. So basically, if you read episode 3, that's just been released, there are 2 sex scenes possible. You can pick if you want to go for cis romance or gay romance. There's 2 options, because I like to make my stories applicable to anyone who wants to fancy it, tickles their fancy, as it were. So yes, I had to write 2 in-depth sex scenes in this episode, and that was interesting. That was out of my comfort zone. I liked them, but I'm dreading, because every Friday I do a live stream and I have to read it out loud on the live stream, that people will ask to pick that route, and I'm going to have to read a sex scene out loud on Friday. So if you fancy me reading out loud to you on a live stream a very raunchy sex scene on Friday, then please join me at 8 p.m. GMT, because that's what I'll be doing this Friday. That's tomorrow. Obviously, other time zones are listed down below. So yeah, that's my ramblings today. Don't be scared of mythology. Please enter the Aphrodite writing competition that I'm setting up. The Aphrodite. There will be more of a prompt this week, so check out that story over on my Dorian app. I will see you tomorrow for the live stream over at 8 p.m. and I will see you next week for another video. And remember, books save lives, so keep reading. Oh, I look quite cute today. I think it's the earrings. Aren't they wonderful? So nice. Go me. Well done me. You've worked hard today. Celebrate by eating some chocolate. I shall. Thank you, I shall.